Life in the United States during World War II. World War II played a role in pulling the United States up out of the Great Depression. Factories no longer had to deal with problems of overproduction as orders for war materials came pouring in from Europe. Factories were producing war goods as quickly as possible. Unemployment fell to only 1.2% by 1944, and wages rose 35%. Farmers benefited as well, as orders from Europe increased. Production doubled, and their income tripled. The U.S. became the world's largest manufacturer of armaments, including 300,000 planes, 2.6 million machine guns, 6 million tons of bombs, and 91,000 cargo and warships. 17 million jobs were created in the United States. The Lend-Lease program that began in 1941 encouraged even more production to support the Allies in Europe.
As the U.S. built its fighting forces, the President called upon the nation's manufacturing might to build the implements of war needed to fight the enemy.
We shall need everything that we have and everything that our allies have to defeat the Nazis and the fascists in the coming battles on the continent of Europe, and the Japanese on the continent of Asia, and in the islands of the Pacific.
The U.S. mobilization for war stands among the monumental achievements in American history. In record time, the U.S. economy was completely transformed from producing peacetime goods to maximum war production. FDR established the War Production Board, the WPB, to direct the effort, and he set demanding goals.
In this year, 1942, we shall produce 60,000 planes, 45,000 tanks, 20,000 anti-aircraft guns. We shall build 8 million tons of merchant ships.
Rationing and recycling. Rationing in the United States was designed to make sure the troops were receiving the supplies they needed while avoiding shortages here in the United States. Rationing meant that people were only allowed to purchase a certain amount of a product. This made sure there would be some left for other people. Here's a poster designed to encourage support for rationing. In the top image, we can see that one woman bought all the sugar that was available, leaving none for the next shopper. The bottom picture shows each woman only being allowed to purchase one bag of sugar. This way, they each get some, and there's still more left for the other shoppers too. Lots of foods were rationed during World War II. Bacon, butter, sugar, meat, tea, cooking fat, jam, cheese, eggs, and milk were all rationed. Posters were encouraging adults to support rationing. Cartoons were used to encourage children to support the movement as well.
That bacon grease. Housewives of America, one of the most important things you can do is to save your waste kitchen fats, bacon grease, meat drippings, frying fats. We and our allies need millions of pounds of fats to help win the war. For fats make glycerin, and glycerin makes explosives. Every year, 2 billion pounds of waste kitchen fats are thrown away. Enough glycerin for 10 billion rapid-fire cannon shells. A belt 150,000 miles long, 6 times around the Earth. A skillet of bacon grease is a little munitions factory. Meat dripping sink Axis warships. Waste frying fat speed depth charges on their way to crush Axis submarines. Your pound of waste fat will give some boy at the front an extra clip of cartridge.
Do you still want the bacon grease poodle?
Pour your waste kitchen fats in a clean, wide-mouthed can. That's right, not a glass jar or paper bag. Please strain the fats through a kitchen sieve. Keep in a cool, dark place so it won't become rancid. When you have a pound or more, take it to your neighborhood meat dealer, who is patriotically cooperating. He will weigh the fat and pay you for it.
So you want weenies instead of money? Okay, catch 'em.
Save waste fats to make explosives. Look for the official insignia in your meat dealer's window.
What do you think of that cartoon? Would that propaganda have encouraged you to support rationing? Here's a propaganda poster encouraging adults to support rationing. People were also encouraged to grow their own food and have gardens at home. These gardens were known as victory gardens. Magazines would print stories about victory gardens, and lots of women's magazines even gave instructions on how to grow and preserve garden vegetables. Families were encouraged to can their own vegetables, so the canned vegetables in the stores could be saved for the troops. This poster is from the U.S. Food Administration. During the war, food was rationed for 4 reasons. First, there was a drop of 17% in the number of people working on farms because they were either fighting in the war or working in one of the factories. Number 2, extra food was needed to feed all the Allied troops. Number 3, some countries that had provided foods like sugar were now occupied by the Axis powers. 4, most ships were used for the war effort and not available to transport goods. Rationing wasn't just limited to food. Anything that could be used in the war effort was rationed. Tires, bicycles, gasoline, fuel oil, and shoes because of the rubber needed. Even ladies' stockings because the nylon could be used to make parachutes. People were issued little books called ration books. When they went to the store to purchase a rationed product, they needed to turn in a stamp when they paid. When they were out of stamps, they couldn't buy any more of that product until the next month. Americans were also encouraged to recycle and donate items that could be used in the war effort. People were encouraged to join the war as well. Remember what we learned about propaganda and how it's designed to encourage particular feelings and ideas? Notice the colors in this image. Here's another poster. Look at the faces on this poster. Are they designed to be handsome and attractive? Did you notice that they're both holding weapons? What about the globe? What part of the world is being displayed? The government sold war bonds to help finance World War II. Beginning in 1942, Americans could buy bonds on an installment plan that would take money directly from their paycheck. This installment plan took a little money from their paycheck every month and put it towards the purchase of a war bond. An installment plan was also established for children. Children could buy a 25-cent stamp and paste it into a book. They would do this over and over again until they had saved $18.75. That money could be used to purchase a bond. Later, after the war, they would be able to turn in the bond for $25. The changing role of women. Does this poster look familiar? She's famous. With men being shipped overseas by the thousands to fight in the war, women were needed to step in and fill the factory jobs. Before they took jobs in the factory, a woman's role had been in the home, taking care of the children and running the household. Their children, and sometimes even their husbands, didn't believe that they were smart enough or strong enough to hold down a factory job. Some of the first Rosies did struggle in their new roles as they went to work in the factories for the first time, but many women were really excited to work. After suffering through the Great Depression, they wanted a chance to earn a paycheck. Here are some real-life Rosies. So now that we know this poster is about women working in the factories, let's find out what a riveter actually does.
So this was a tool that was used during the Second World War to help make airplanes, specifically B-17 bombers. And basically the way that it worked was it punched and fastened these things, rivets, through sheets of metal or skins to fasten the metal together and make up an airplane. Kind of like the way those metal things on your jeans hold together the layers of denim. This particular rivet gun was recently donated to Mohai by a woman named Margaret Berry. Margaret was one of millions of women across the United States that were nicknamed Rosie the Riveter when they took jobs in industries that supported the war effort. Rosie the Riveters were industrial working women during World War II who were famed for being patriotic, loyal, hardworking, and feminine. Their iconic image gained a nationwide significance that we still recognize today.
At Boeing, Margaret was part of a team that made Seattle a leader in war-related industry. Boeing Plant 2, located down near the Duwamish River, produced nearly 7,000 B-17 Flying Fortress bombers, many of which Margaret would have worked on during her time as a Rosie.
In an oral history interview that Mohai recorded with Margaret, she remembers how one day she smashed her own thumb with a rivet gun. By 1944, Boeing employed about 50,000 workers, over half of whom were women. In fact, by the war's end, about 1/3 of the total workforce nationwide was made up of women.
And at the end of the war, most working women returned to their more traditional roles in the home. Those who chose to stay were often demoted or had to accept lower wages to make room for the millions of men returning from the front lines of Europe and the Pacific.
Here's another picture of two real-life Rosie the Riveters and a poster from the U.S. Employment Service. Now take a look around the classroom. Where's the poster of Rosie the Riveter? WAVES stood for Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service. Women were encouraged to take over jobs in naval offices so the men could fight in the war.
This book is about the WAVES, which is an acronym for Women Accepted for Voluntary Emergency Service during World War II. I expected the photographs to be, look at the girls trying to do a man's job. And in fact, it was completely opposite. What I saw was a very respectful view of women in World War II in service to their country doing very serious work. And the women actually came from all over. The initial training was done in Iowa, and training was then consolidated in New York City at what's now Lehman College. They basically shut down the college for the duration of the war, and this was the National Training Center. I find it very fascinating that while the women came from all over the country, they were city girls and farm girls, and they were girls in the sense that they were young, they were 18 years old. And these are women who had never been away from home, and here they are in New York City taking a subway train to do their training in the Bronx.
Here's another poster encouraging women to help with the war effort. The bottom of it says, Uncle Sam needs stenographers. Get civil service information at your local post office. The changing role for African Americans. Job opportunities opened up for African Americans in many factories as workers left to fight in the war. Here's a picture of some African American Rosie the Riveters. Would this be an example of discrimination? No. The opportunity to work in a factory would not be discrimination. When World War II started, the Army and Air Force refused to train black officers and pilots. Is this discrimination? Yes, it's definitely discrimination. President Roosevelt passed a law that banned discrimination in defense industries. Would this fall under the category of discrimination? No. To ban discrimination was to make sure it was not happening. The Tuskegee Airmen were one of the first all-black units to see combat. They shot down more than 200 enemy planes. Is this discrimination? Maybe. They were an all-black unit, so they were segregated. But they were also allowed to fight as pilots. Racial riots often erupted in cities as more blacks moved to the north and resulted in violence and sometimes death. Is this discrimination? Yes. Riots based on race would be a form of discrimination. At the beginning of the war, the Navy only employed blacks as kitchen staff, also called messmen. Would this be discrimination? Yes, this would definitely be discrimination. Blood from African Americans could not be used for white casualties. Is this discrimination? Yes, this is definitely an example of discrimination. African American soldiers and sailors made a valuable contribution to the war effort. Discrimination? No, it would not be an example of discrimination. Executive Order 9981. Another group of Americans also faced discrimination during World War II. Japanese Americans. After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans were feared and hated by many. Although 2/3 of the Japanese Americans in the United States had been born here, making them U.S. citizens. Many people feared spies and questioned Japanese Americans about their loyalty to the United States. Internment camps were crowded and uncomfortable. The conditions were harsh. President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. This directed the Army to relocate more than 100,000 Japanese Americans who were living on the West Coast and move them into internment camps. Here's what an internment camp would have looked like. With only days to prepare for the move, most Japanese Americans had to leave behind most of their valuable possessions. Many abandoned their homes and businesses or sold them for less money than they were worth. Most had to stay in the internment camps for the next 3 years. One detainee remembered how his father suffered. After all those years, having worked his whole life to build the American dream, having it all taken away, he died a broken man. In 1988, America finally acknowledged how unfair and unjust this relocation program was. The United States Congress issued a formal apology and agreed to give each survivor $20,000 as a token of America's regretful actions. Despite how horribly the Japanese Americans were treated, 33,000 Japanese Americans joined the military to fight against the Axis powers, while some of their own family members
My father came from Japan in 1905. He was 15 when he immigrated from Japan. He worked until he was able to to actually build a store.
Let me tell you a story in the form of a dream. I don't know why I have to tell it, but I know what it means. Close your eyes, just picture the scene as I paint it for you. It was World War II when this man named Kenji woke up. Ken was not a soldier. He was just a man with a family who owned a store in LA. That day, he crawled out of bed like he always did. Bacon and eggs with wife and kids. He lived on the second floor of a little store he ran. He moved to LA from Japan. They called him immigrant. In Japanese, he'd say he was called Issei. That meant first generation in the United States when everybody was afraid of the Germans, afraid of the Japs, but most of all afraid of a homeland attack. And that morning, when Ken went out on the doormat, his world went black, cause right there, front page news, 3 weeks before 1942, Pearl Harbor's been bombed and the Japs are coming. Pictures of soldiers dying and running. Ken knew what it would lead to, just like he guessed. The president said the evil Japanese in our home country would be locked away. They gave Ken a couple of days to get his whole life packed in 2 bags. Just 2 bags. Couldn't even pack his clothes. Some folks didn't even have a suitcase to pack anything in, so 2 trash bags is all he gave them. And when the kids asked Mom, where are we going? Nobody even knew what to say to them. Ken didn't want to lie. He said the U.S. is looking for spies, so we have to live in a place called Manzanar, where a lot of Japanese people are. Stop it, don't look at the gunman. You don't want to get the soldiers wondering if you're gonna run or not, because if you run then you might get shot. Other than that, try not to think about it. Try not to worry about it being so crowded. But someday we'll get out. Someday, someday.
As soon as war broke out, so the FBI came and they just come to the house and you have to come. All the Japanese have to go. They took Mr. Lee and people couldn't understand why they had to take him because he's just innocent laborer.
So now they're in a town with soldiers surrounding them. Every day, every night, look down at them. From watchtowers up on the wall, Ken couldn't really hate them at all. They were just doing the job and he wasn't gonna make any problems. He had a little garden, vegetables and fruits that he gave to the troops in a basket his wife made. But in the back of his mind, he wanted his family's life saved. Prisoners of war in their own country, what for? The time passed in the prison town. He wondered if he'd live it down if and when they were free. The only way out was joining the army, and supposedly some men went out for the army, signed on, and ended up flying to Japan with a bomb. That 15-kiloton blast put an end to the war pretty fast. 2 cities were blown to bits. The end of the war came quick. Ken got out big hopes of a normal life with his kids and his wife, but then they got back to their home and what they saw made them feel so alone. These people had trashed every room, smashed in the windows and bashed in the doors, written on the walls and the floor, Japs not welcome anymore. And Kenji dropped both of his bags to the sides and just stood outside. He looked at his wife without words to say. She looked back at him, wiping tears away, and said, someday we'll be okay, someday. Now the names have been changed, but the story's true. My family was locked up back in 42. My family was there where it was dark and damp, and they called it an internment camp.
When we first got back from camp, it was pretty bad.
I remember my husband said, oh, we're going to stay till last. Then my husband died before they closed the camp.